inclusion exclusion criteria and so on. So that is the same thing. Yeah. So you have to go back to your presentation, then and the report that you get from the previous students, then you get these examples. Okay. So for example, you want to see the mean age of the villagers. You only have this subject, but later on you want to say that the mean age for the reference population. Okay, so that is inferential statistics. And so with that, aduh. Okay, so with that, then you may be asked on the sampling method, how you choose your study subject. It means if you go to Kampung Kok Pasir, but you cannot go to all people, then you want to choose how you're going to choose that. So that is sampling method. Okay, you have the non-probability or the convenience sampling, means that you just go and just take whoever you found. Okay, so that is non-probability, means that there's no equality of chance to be selected for your study. But the other sampling method is probability sampling. So you have the simple, systematic, stratified, cluster, multi-stage. I won't go into detail of each, but this is the thing that you have to go back and read on what it is. Okay. So I just give example for simple random sampling. So when say that, okay, you're going to do simple random sampling, then because this is essay question, so you have to mention using random number generator, whereby it is all people in the source population are having equally chance to be selected. Okay, so you have to explain on the random digit table, means that is a just pick up the numbers within the sampling frame. This is sampling frame, the numbers that you have for your population. So you maybe pick up, if it's just, you may start with you can do this is for the software calculator, and then they will highlight, okay, the number that they so you can just get, okay, number 590. So you have 590 is Encik Ahmad, or something like that. So so you have to explain that. So you have to choose and explain. Okay. So for example, simple random sampling. Okay, this is the meaning of it. That means each member in the population has equal chance to be selected. So you have the sampling frame. You have all the list of the houses. Okay, because previously, if you can go to kampung on first residency, then you will have to do numbering of the houses. So you have house number one, number two, and so on. Then from that you want to select 200 houses. Okay, so this is sampling frame. This the method is sampling method. Okay, so this is your study population. So if systematic sampling means that, or it can be called also interval sampling. So this is also in your lecture note 206. Okay, go back to that lecture note. But basically systematic sampling, you have a gap or interval. Means that if it's one interval, then you take this one, you didn't take this one, you take this one, you didn't take this one, and so on. Okay, so there is an interval. Okay. So when if you are talking about systematic sampling, then you have to tell that there is a gap or interval, okay, and the interval is and whether it's 1, 2, 3. Okay, if it's 2, then you go this one. You skip 2, then you take this one. So something like that. So you have to explain well, and if it is a essay question. Okay, so this is the way, the number. So you have to explain, if it's essay, then you have to explain the sampling frame. You have how many units, then your interval, which is symbol K, and how you're going to get the interval, means that you will you need 200. Okay, let's say you have 500 houses, but you need only 200, then you divide 200 divide by 500, then you get 1 over 3. So you take every third house. Okay, so you can start from randomly from 1 to 3. So you have to explain the whole lot if it's, you are answering on the systematic random sampling. Um,
Ana tadi do kate nai. Uh, huh?
Okay. So that is sampling method. I won't go into the other sampling method. You have to read yourself or else I tak boleh siapkan satu malam lah. Okay. Any
Okay.
questions on sampling method?
No. Dia quite straightforward. Dia just macam
Okay, I move on. Sample size calculation. Okay,
cuma aku tak tahu macam mana
today
orang come up with
presentation, some of the
eh
panel
ni
asking you on
ni method yang kita guna
whether
ni
you
quite
calculate sample size or
straightforward.
not.
Why?
Okay, why you
Aku
need
tak
to
faham.
calculate sample size? Because you want to make sure and whatever statistics that you are
Sampai
computing
statistik.
later is
Abang
valid
tambah 3 daripada
for the
mak aku kata.
population. Okay, because
What now? Okay, what
you
now?
only sample them, but you want to tell for the whole kampung. Okay, so that's why you need to know. For
Oh,
example,
that's mine. How come?
if you take only 10 people, can it represent the
What's happening?
population of the kampung people? If cannot, then how many? Is it 50? Is it 100? So how many that is good enough for you to take and for you to measure and the mean of something something. Okay, so that is the reason why you need to calculate sample size. If you want to compare, let's say when you present this morning, you present pre and post test, right? So you want to know the whether your knowledge is increasing or not. Okay,
My
but and
knowledge
how
is
many you have to
down.
use, how many people that you want to do the survey so that you can really get uh, the correct answer. If you use a very small sample size, for example, you just use 15, then maybe you get a non-significant difference, but actually the non-significant difference is due to a very small sample size that you use. So that's why you need to calculate sample size. Okay. Sample size also, you have your one lecture in GMT 206. I've seen today year two students have a very good senior notes on this on statistics. I don't know whether you have it also. So I hope if you have it, please go through the notes. Okay. So if you are looking into mean age, so age is
Ah, aku nak
numerical,
mean ke?
so you
Aku
use
dengar mean.
single mean.
If you are looking for
If you
means,
want to compare two
if
proportion,
you are looking for the meanings,
if you want to look into prevalence of diabetes or prevalence of hypertension, then you can use single proportion. If you compare two mean, for example, you're comparing knowledge score before and after, so you have to use two mean formula. So it's not difficult, two mean formula, two proportion formula. Okay. What is the formula? Then you have to go back to the lecture notes. Okay. Aduh. Why dia jadi macam ni? Okay. So so that comes to the method that we say that sampling, inclusion exclusion criteria, that this is based on the your study or the scenario. So but then we have to look into again on uh, the other things. Okay, for example, this is actually in GMT 206 we have uh, we supposed to have a SPSS practicum,
ada.
but during your time we have to do that online.
Yes ah.
So if you go back to your note in GMT 206, this is what uh, we have for the SPSS practicum. So you can look back into that. Okay, but I know that the online hands-on is really ineffective. Okay, that's why you need to learn again when you presented. So hopefully, I hope that your presentation today and all of the group members knows how to do the analysis. Okay. So for example, your task is to describe age and sex. Okay. So how you going to describe age? This is numerical. How you going to describe sex, which is categorical variable.
Is it
Okay.
repeat?
How many of the villages has diabetes? So what is this? Okay. So we may ask you what is the study design. So when you have your previous group and result, they are doing the KAP questionnaire. So that is cross-sectional study. But when you do intervention, you do before intervention, after intervention, then there is an interventional study. Okay. So we have two big group, the observational or the non-experimental, or the interventional or the experimental. So for observational, cross-sectional study, case control study, cohort study. For interventional, you have the control or uncontrolled. Okay. In your case, you have uncontrolled, and in your case, you're still doing observational study, but not really interventional, but you do pre and post test only. Okay, interventional, you really, because in your case, you are not really do interventional study. You are just evaluating your intervention. Okay, so that is a little bit different of that. But go back to your notes. You have cross-sectional study, but what it means is that for one particular person, you just look into one particular time. Okay, uh, and
Oh,
whether what is their age, what is their sex, whether they have diabetes or not. Okay, so just cross. Okay, so that's why it is a cross-sectional study. So what is the characteristic? What is the advantages? What is the disadvantages? All are in your lecture notes. Okay, for example, cross-sectional study is easier to do, less costly, okay, and fast because you just do once for every subject. Okay, so you have to look into advantage and disadvantage of it. Disadvantage including cross-sectional study, you cannot show causality because you cannot say that being older is the reason that you've got diabetes. You cannot because you doesn't. You just look into one particular time only. Okay. So in GMT 206 also, I've give you a lecture on descriptive epidemiology, and so and then we go for the statistics part. Okay, we have descriptive and we have inferential statistics. For descriptive statistics, we have the central tendency, the one that you mentioned today on the mean, median, mode, and the central dispersion, which is the variance, standard deviation, range, and interquartile range. Okay, so go back and read what is mean, what is median, how you're going to check normality distribution using histogram for you to say it is approximately symmetrical bell-shaped curve. Okay, so this is for the statistics. Okay, if it's categorical, you use frequency with percentage. You can present in bar or pie chart. In numerical, you have to check normality distribution. You can present either with mean standard deviation or median interquartile range, or you can tabulate or use graph histogram. Okay. And so the question may be how you're going to present, how you're going to summarize age. So you have to look, age is numerical, so this is the answer. Sex, so sex is category, so this is the answer. Yeah. Okay. Any questions so far?
mesti. Sekali Zul tak ambil.
No, Prof.
Okay.
Nenai ko,
And
is that my guess?
then we look into others in descriptive epidemiology, and which is measure of disease occurrence, natural history, and level of prevention. Okay, so let's say you are given the scenario like this. So how you going to describe? Can be that how you going to describe the finding? So 63 out of 347. So this is how many percent? Because this is diabetes yes or no. So it's categorical. So you have to use the frequency
Yang frequency
percentage.
dulu.
Okay. Then how would you describe these findings? Then you have to tell us, okay, you are using frequency and percentage. That means to 63 over 347 times 100. Okay. Then maybe the question will be outline the natural history of type 2 diabetes. Okay, so Maybe they all can ask you on the hypertension, obesity. So it depends on that. Okay. And then prevention. Okay. So how are you going to describe how many percent of diabetes? Then this is goes back to the concept of incidence rate and prevalence rate. Okay. This is on the topic my lecture on measures of disease occurrence. Okay. For your batch, I think I give you the narrated lecture PowerPoint. Okay, you can listen to that again. So incidence rate is new cases per population at risk over a period of time. Prevalence is new and old case over total population. Okay, so if it's diabetes, then we better use prevalence. Non-communicable disease, we use prevalence rate. That means the new cases and old cases over the total population, the number of people in the kampung. Okay, so when you talk about level of prevention, this is the natural history of disease. That means from no disease, uh, get the disease, and then but there are there's no symptoms yet, so they are subclinical. Then they develop symptoms, okay, and then they maybe develop complications or death. So this is the natural history. It means that if the disease is not intervened or treated, how it goes along until the death of a person. So that is natural history. For example, for diabetes, for hypertension now, you have the no disease, and then you have the onset, but there are no symptoms. So now we have the pre-hypertension stage. So maybe here is no disease, then pre-hypertension stage, then subclinical, no symptoms, then they are symptomatic and was diagnosed to have hypertension, and then they may have stroke, they may have disability due to stroke until they die. So that is the natural history of disease. Okay, and then we usually didn't go away from the common diseases of public health importance. Okay, which for this year you are covering the obesity, the hypertension, and the smoking. Okay, uh, then with this, then you have to understand the prevention. When there's no disease, is a primary prevention. When there are disease but asymptomatic or they are at risk, then is secondary prevention. And then later on, prevention, tertiary prevention is prevention of the complication or rehabilitation. So, and so this is the an examples. The primary prevention is the intervention implemented before there is evidence of disease or injury. For example, in your case, you just give an uh, static exhibition to everyone, even though they doesn't have the hypertension yet. So that is primary prevention because you want to reduce or eliminate the risk. Okay, and then secondary prevention, intervention implemented after a disease has begun, but before it is symptomatic. Okay, means that uh, in your intervention you do health screening, right? So health screening is secondary prevention because you can identify those who are undiagnosed. Okay, so that is secondary prevention. Undiagnosed because they are asymptomatic or they have mild symptom only. So becomes a secondary prevention. Okay, so it is to early detect identification through screening and treatment. Okay, so screening is secondary prevention. So if you are asked to outline the activities that you will do in your intervention, and then so you outline, you have health screening, you have health talk, you have exhibition, then maybe you are asked on, so what is the level of prevention? So say that the screening is actually a secondary prevention because it is the implementation of the disease that have begun but asymptomatic. You do health talk to everybody even though they doesn't have hypertension because that is primary prevention. Okay, or if you do tertiary prevention, for example, you go and find the villagers who have stroke and you teach them physiotherapy so that they can minimize their disability, then that is tertiary prevention. Okay, that is rehabilitation. Okay, so you have to know and give examples, look back into the scenario if it is a scenario based question. If it is multiple true false, then you have to understand the meaning of each level of prevention. Okay. Okay, one of you asked me whether primordial is important or not. There are some who mention about primordial prevention, but for you, if you combine primordial and primary also, it is okay, and because it's something like before the disease to occur. Okay, so focus on the primary, secondary, and tertiary. Even though some authors, yeah, they also talk about primordial. Okay, but it is not much different actually. Okay, it's just that uh, we are talking about the same thing, which is a stage of disease is no disease yet. Okay, so any question on that?
Nine.
Senyap semua ni dengar
Uh,
Pikal.
Doktor,
Ya.
boleh tak nak confirm balik for incident rate and prevalence rate? For prevalence rate, it is NCD, it is suitable for NCD, right? Kalau incident rate, communicable disease, betul ke?
Dia incidence rate more commonly used for communicable disease, because communicable disease we can get new cases, kan? For example, in COVID, when you calculate COVID, you always calculate the new cases because you want to say how fast is the disease to occur. Okay, but prevalence tells you how many have the disease, so it's a burden of disease. Yeah. In my lecture, I've put up the requirement for incidence rate. What you have to know to calculate incidence rate. You need the number of cases, you need the definition of cases, definition of the disease, and so on. So you have the incidence rate, prevalence rate, definition, requirement, users. Okay, these three things in one lecture in measure of disease occurrence. So you have to digest this because you may get in multiple true false question.
Okay, thank you, Doktor.
Okay.
Prof, I have a question. The slide
Yeah.
prior to this study, can we see the slide prior to this, Prof? Yeah,
Which one?
yeah, yes, Prof. Like when they ask us to describe these findings, ni, what they expect us to answer?
Okay. And usually this is just a simple questions. If question, they will be much clearer. But basically, uh, describe these findings. That means you have 63 adult had diabetes out of 347. So I'm going to describe it. That means you will describe 63. How many percent are diabetic, which is actually what? Then you can describe as prevalence. Right, because this is diabetes, non-communicable disease, and you doesn't know whether this is new case or old case. So it's more of prevalence. But in real question, it will be more guided to you lah. Okay, I just give you example and roughly only. Okay.
So that means, Prof, if they ask the describe the finding, they want us to either tell the prevalence or incidence lah.
Yeah, but question won't be in question. Usually they say describe the occurrence of diabetes in the villages. So usually the question will be like that. So you have to think, okay, so this is diabetes, non-communicable disease, and you doesn't know whether this is old or new case. Is maybe the mix of it. So you can say that the occurrence of diabetes is 63 over 347, which is how many percent. So you can say that the proportion of diabetes in this kampung is how many percent. So because this is categorical, to use proportion is already correct. But if you can also say that because here you cannot do prevalence because you doesn't know the numbers of the total number of population. But if the scenario just now we mentioned that apa 2000 plus kan, and So here we put that here. So you can say that, okay, just now how many diabetic and over 2000 plus people, then that becomes prevalence. So it's up, there will be a guide on the questions to answer which one, whether it's proportion or the prevalence. Okay. Okay, Tina.
Yes, Prof. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so you have gone to the intervention, smoking, obesity, healthy lifestyle, hypertension, which is the precursor for cardiovascular disease. So go back and read on the shared modifiable risk factors or the cardiometabolic risk factors. And now it is called cardiometabolic risk factors. And so the four common risk factors: tobacco use, unhealthy diet, physical inactivity, and harmful use of alcohol. And you remember Prof. Hana mentioned about the unhealthy diets and on the food pyramid and so on. So that is a part and parcel of all these modifiable risk factors. Uh, okay, then we may go, the scenario can go asking about you on the, you're doing the knowledge distribution, knowledge survey. So they will be give you this question. So what is your study design? Okay, so you have to understand back. Just now I've mentioned you about the cross-sectional study. So if you are compare, but so if you just distribute knowledge questionnaire, then that is cross-sectional study. Okay, but if they change this scenario and say that to compare knowledge between those who have diabetes and those who doesn't have diabetes, so what will be your study design? Okay, so you have two group, diabetes and no diabetes. Okay, so you have a group of people who have, in this case, example of garlic study. This is just I just apa ni, reka-reka je, okay. But if you have cases with a disease and a group of people without disease, and then you want to see whether do they have the risk factors or not before they have the disease, then okay, then this is
Mati
case control study, because you start with case and control and you want to look back. Okay, and so if you start with those who doesn't have the disease but have an exposure to risk, then you follow up in certain time to see whether they have disease or not, then this is cohort study. Okay, just now is case control study, this is cohort study. But in your case, just you are doing an intervention, you are looking into before and after study design, kan? Because you give the questionnaire before your intervention, and then you give again after the intervention, after your activity program. Okay, so that is before and after study design. So this is other study design, case control, cross sectional, and cohort study, and you have to go back to the lecture note, look into the advantages and disadvantages. That can be in multiple true false question as well. Okay. Okay, then we can go to the statistic part. Then you have to remember what is null hypothesis and what is alternative hypothesis. So what is important in writing hypothesis? If the question is as the state the hypothesis, please put both null and alternative. Okay, because then please remember null, no. Okay, there's no significant difference, no significant difference of what? So significant difference of knowledge score. Okay, or you can say that difference of mean knowledge score. Okay, and you have to mention between who and who. Okay. Sorry, this is about diabetes, this is about and hypertension. Okay, typo there. Okay, so you have to finish all. You cannot just say that. Sometimes a student write no different, no different of knowledge among hypertension. That is not uh, really correct. Okay, and so make sure you write it uh, correctly in terms of there is no significant difference of what? Of knowledge score. Between who? Then you have to specify between this and this. Okay, you cannot just say among hypertension and so on. Then the null is just changing the no to a. Okay, if this is the
Perfect goldfish.
uh, numerical because it's score. If it is categorical, then there's no association. Okay, go back to the lecture note how to do to write on alternative and null hypothesis. Okay, and
Easy.
this is actually an easy marks for you, but many students fail to get the marks because they just simply write no different of knowledge between hypertension, full stop. Then we cannot give you marks on that. Okay. Ah.
Duria.
Okay, so if two tail means that you didn't say the direction, so you just say that there is a different. One tail means that you are saying that this group is higher than this group. That is one tail. You are giving the direction. Okay, so you can choose either to put in two tail or one tail. Okay, so then you have all these statistics. Okay,
Prof,
yeah, yeah,
Prof, I would like to ask,
ah,
for the one tail, do we need to use the word significant? Significantly higher.
can also. Yang
Okay, Prof.
pentingnya you show which one, which side. So that become one tail. Okay.
Faham, faham.
Ah. And then you have to mention what is the different of what? Different of knowledge score. So this is important. For one tail, it's important to give you the direction. Okay, and the comparing group. So the three things very important. What is you are comparing? You are comparing what score? Knowledge score, attitude score, practice score, or maybe BP, systolic blood pressure. Okay, so that is numerical. Okay, we really have to put the numerical part. If you say that smoking status, then that becomes categorical. The second one is that you have to tell the, if it's one tail, you have to tell the direction, which one is higher, which one is lower. And the third part is that you have to tell the group that you are comparing clearly. So this is hypertensive compared to non-hypertensive. Okay. Okay. So in your presentation, you have presented your mean, your null hypothesis, your p-value, and so on. So go back to each statistics, look into assumptions. Is a different assumptions. What is assumptions is that because statistical test is based on statistical formula, so you have to check whether the formula is appropriate to use or not for your setting. So that is assumptions. Okay. So and so you may be asked, and what is state the uh, state the the state the correct state the appropriate statistical test to be used.
Dishonest
So you,
characteristics.
and if you just mention state marks only 2, then you can just say chi-square test. But if the question is state and justify, then you have to say that chi-square test because the independent variable is categorical, the dependent variable is categorical, and this is independent study design. Okay, so you have to tell why you say this is chi-square. Okay, and so it depends on the question. Yeah, if multiple true false, sometimes we give you, okay, the appropriate test for the following is, so kita cakap lah, to compare knowledge score between hypertension and non-hypertension is independent t test. So true or false, something like that. Okay, and So it can be in multiple true false, it can be in scenario based question. How are you going to decide whether it is an an and what the test is all about? First, you look into whether the same subject or dependent subject, like you do the before and after. So this is a dependent subject. Okay. And if it's a different subject, if you do cross-sectional study, each people have is different people, then it is independent subject. Then you look into the numerical variable. You look into the outcome variable. So if the outcome variable is numerical, for example, you are doing the knowledge score before and after. When it comes to numerical, it is T test. Numerical T test. If it's dependent subject, PET T test. If independent subject, independent T test. Okay, so numerical T test, PET or independent T test. If it's categorical, okay, for dependent is Magnema. For the independent subject, then you have to look into the assumption. Okay, so assumption of 5% less than 20%, 5% less than 5 is more than 20%, and is making whether you want to choose chi-square or Fisher exact test. Okay, and yeah. Okay, so you may, if it is in short in essay question, then you may be given this output. Interpret the output. Okay, so so how you going to interpret this is for the chi-square test. You have to look first on the footnote. Okay, the assumption just now,
What the fuck?
less than 5 is more than is less than 20%. So less than 5 is 0%, which is less than 20%. That's so that the assumption is met. Okay, so you have to write specifically the interpretation. This is a chi-square test. The assumption for chi-square test, the expected count of less than 5 is 0, which is less than 20%. Therefore, the assumption for chi-square is met. Then the and then you can see the p-value. So the p-value is 8.856, which is bigger than 0.005, means that it is uh, it is significant to reject. It is not significant to reject the null hypothesis. So null hypothesis is accepted. Okay, so how you go to present? This is also for um, each statistical test. You have to know when to use it, assumption, the interpretation, and then how to put that in table. Okay, what things that you have to put in table. Okay, and so all these they may ask after that, interpret this output. Please and create a table to present these findings. You have to create this. Okay, for independent t-test different, for chi-square different. So you have to look into that notes again.
Oh,
Okay, for example, for t-test, you have to look into leaving test. For the assumption, if it's not significant, then equivariance assume. So you have to look into uh, and this p-value. This is the p-value for leaving test, not significant. So it means equivariance assume. So you can take this p-value. Okay. So how you going to answer? You have to put all the thing here. Okay, because the interpretation, maybe you are given 10 marks. So you cannot just simply say that, oh, this is not significant different, full stop. Then you won't get full marks. You have to tell that first, the living test is 0.24, which is more than 5. So it is not significant, means that the accept null hypothesis for living test, means that it is equivariance assumed. Therefore, the independent t-test, the p-value is this one. which is more not significant, so no significant difference. Therefore, then you give the conclusion of based on the null or the alternative hypothesis. You put all this, then you get the full marks. Okay. Similarly, if it is correlation, then you have to have three things. In correlation, you have to tell the significant, the p-value. You have to tell the correlation coefficient. Then you have to tell the direction, which is whether it's positive or negative correlation. Okay, so and you have to go back to the notes, look back into when to use the assumption, the interpretation, and then the table for presentation. Okay, so all this
It's
important for
very
every
funny.
test. Banyak nak baca ni. Okay, but you have done this during your presentation preparation. So I think if everybody learn during your preparation, then there's no problem of that. Okay. Then we may ask, if it's a scenario-based question, you may be asked you outline your intervention activities. Okay, so so you can use your experience, whatever you listen in the presentation today, for you to look into, but match with the scenario lah. Uh, cannot like if you your group is on hypertension and suddenly the scenario is about diabetes, you talk about hypertension activity, cannot lah. Okay, so you have to use the look into the scenario, but you can roughly you can goreng lah aktiviti apa yang biasanya. Okay. What is the strategy? Strategy is that how you're going to make sure that your intervention works well or success. For example, you put a banner, you go to house visit, and you do crowd pooling activities, like health screening, you do coloring, you do games. So that is your strategies. Okay, you do announcement in the Jumat prayer. So that is your strategy. The intervention is the talk, the exhibition, and what else, the things that you've been doing. Okay, my kampung is doing Zumba and so on. That is intervention activities. Okay, then outline how you're going to evaluate, and this is the part when you are talking about your evaluation. You use questionnaire. You give the questionnaire before they go to for the exhibition, and then after you finish the exhibition, then you give again the questionnaire. That don't stop into that. You have because this is essay, then you have to tell that from the questionnaire you have the knowledge score. So you do knowledge pre and knowledge post, and then you will analyze using PET test. So go up to that level if you are asked to answer outline how you're going to evaluate the health campaign. Okay, so the scenario can be whatever. Okay, it can be diabetes, can be hypertension, smoking, obesity. It can be vector-borne disease like dengue. Okay, and previous group are doing solid waste disposal, so they are doing recycling campaign. They are doing Go to Hoyo campaign. Okay, or and previously and other group are doing family planning. So they give talk on family planning, on method of contraception. So all those things can be the scenario. Okay, but basically and your experience in handling and preparing, planning and implementing uh, the activities at your kampung for the past 2 weeks actually will help you to answer this. Only that, make sure when you are answering activities, answer activities, not strategy. Many students who lost marks because they mix this up. They are so excited. Let's say that your group is doing hypertension and the scenario is on hypertension. They ask on outline activity. You start with strategy, blah 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 blah, and then activity. Then only you realize that, oh, the strategy is on the second question, or or it doesn't have any question on strategy, but you are writing more than half of your answer is on strategy. Which so that is what we call answer what is asked for. Okay, so be careful with that. What is activities? What is strategy? Okay. For example, and group 2, and I've mentioned when you do your draft of PowerPoint, you mix up between activities and strategy. Okay, but then uh, you correct that again so that the presentation is a good one. Okay, so and
Prof,
yeah,
I want to ask, kalau dia minta like outline your intervention activities, it depends on marks, is it? Macam kalau markah 2 bagi 2 macam tu
kalau outline usually around 10 to 15 marks. So write longer lah. Don't write one or two only activities. Okay. So looks into the marks whether an outline, describe, usually you have to write a bit longer, but straight to the point. Okay. Meaning that if it is asked on activities, focus on activity. Don't talk about strategy.
Okay.
Okay.
So at least tu kena the activity kena describe how we
Describe lah sikit. Describe sikit. Contohnya, tak boleh lah tulis kata, we going to do static exhibition full stop. Cakap lah, static exhibition which covers healthy lifestyle, how to improve physical activity, how to healthy diet. Kena cerita lah sikit. Nama lagi essay.
Okay.
Tapi kalau cakap list or state, itu just straight one or two. Because the marks are usually 3 marks only. Okay. Sebab tu saya kata kalau misalnya dia and state the appropriate statistical test, chi-square cukup dah. Tapi kalau kata state and justify the appropriate statistical test, that means you have to tell chi-square test because dah. Then the marks may be 5 marks. Okay. That is some of the tips in answering scenario based question. Okay. But all this can also be asked in multiple true false question.
Okay, Prof.
Makan domino banyak-banyak tadi kan. Malam ni kena study. Stay up lah kan.
Ya.
Okay. So all this actually covered lah. I just covered the whole lot just now. So you may have to dig up your lecture note for GMT 206, but then the intervention and everything, usually you doesn't have any problem because you are doing hands-on at the field. Okay, you plan, you do the activities, you do the strategies, you do the crowd pulling, so and then you prepare presentation, so it's really fresh in your mind. Okay, so that's why usually okay lah. Okay, that's all. And I didn't give the whole lot lah. You have to go back to your notes lah. Cover semua memang tak sempat lah. Ya, siapa tanya tadi?
Prof, better.
Yeah, but
I'm still unclear regarding the difference between chi-square and also Fisher exact. Yang both is less than 5, but the percentage is the one that we determine whether it is Fisher exact or chi-square. Is that right, Prof?
assumption of chi-square is an expected count of less than 5 is less than 20%. Okay. So, if expected count of less than 5 is less than 20%, macam mana you nak tahu yang ni? You tengok dekat footnote ni. Percentage ni. Kan? Percentage have expected count less than 5. So, if this percent is less than 20%, you use chi-square. If that percent more than 20%, you have to use Fisher exact. Both are within in the same output. Cuma if it's chi-square, this is the p-value. If it's Fisher exact, this is the p-value, the exact sig. Boleh?
Fisher exact, we use the exact sig.
Exact lah.
Oh, okay, faham.
Nah, statistician ni nama exact, dia pening-pening buat formula. Jadi dia nak suruh letak nama dia jugalah.
Faham, faham, Prof.
Okay.
Okay, okay.
So tengok kat footnote ni. So yang ni adalah based on
Gila
yang
plan
ni,
dulu.
tengok dekat footnote dia ni. Okay, so untuk chi-square, tengok footnote yang ni untuk you nak tengok chi-square official exact test. Untuk independent t-test, you have to look into living test first. The p-value of living test. If it is not significant, equivariance assume, you ambil sig yang row pertama. Kalau yang ni significant, that means equivariance not assume, then you tengok row kedua. Okay,
Baik, Prof.
so nak tulis tu, you kena tulis semua ni. Barulah cukup, lengkap.
Sorry, Prof.
Boleh? Ya.
Can I
Silakan.
ask for the Levine test? Is it only for independent t-test?
Ya.
Okay, thank you.
Living test is for the independent t-test because it's a test of equality of variance. This is for numerical kan? Numerical, standard deviation, variance. So dia nak tengok equality of variance. Okay, sebab kalau numerical, PET t-test, you doesn't need to look into that. You just need to look into normality distribution. But there's no assumption for homogeneity of variance. Tapi untuk independent t-test, one of the assumption is that homogeneity of variance. So the assumption of homogeneity of variance is answered by the living test. So you have to go back to the assumption. That's why I say that for each test, okay, PET t-test, so PET t-test, the assumption, the dependent variable is numerical. They are dependent subject, random sampling, and that's all. For MAGNIMA, dependent subject, categorical dependent variable. So this is MAGNIMA test. Chi-square, you have the random sampling is you can put to all assumption. Numerical, random sampling, normal distribution. That is the must. Then you can add on for independent t-test, homogeneity of variance.
What the
For
fuck?
chi-square and
Dia
Fisher
dah
Z
sampai
test,
situ.
categorical, never mention on normality because categorical you doesn't check normality because normality distribution is for numerical. So if you put assumption categorical normal distribution, that is totally wrong. Okay. So numerical, yes, you have to put normal distribution. For categorical, no normal distribution, but for chi-square, this is the assumption to choose whether it's chi-square or Fisher exact test. Okay? So this is just a summary. But you have to go back to the lecture note for each and every. Okay, Brandon? Any more question?
I think not, Prof.
Okay. So good luck. Go and dig up your GMT 206. Okay. Congratulations. All groups presented very well today. Okay. So good luck for your Thursday exam. Okay. So I stop here.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay.
Thank you so
Prof.
much,